Amazing. Thank you so much for the intro. I feel like everyone always says, it's an honor to be here, but I truly believe that. This is really cool for me because my first Calgary UX meetup that I ever attended was an accessibility focused one. And now to sort of come full circle is a pretty neat experience. So happy to give back. And I hope I meet your expectations there, Louise. I hope Scott and I can meet that for you. So I'm just going to jump into presentation mode here. So 1 second. There we go. So before I begin, I typically like to just let this slide soak in for a minute. It often takes people a little bit off guard, including myself, because we've come to absolutely hate on the font Comic Sans, and that's exactly what we're using in this presentation. So as a designer, I should really know better. But as an accessibility advocate, I know that Comic Sans is actually a decent font to assist with those with dyslexia. So we'll show you some better dyslexia fonts later, but just wanted to kind of point out the irregular shapes of the letters in Comic Sans, which allows for a little bit of an easier focus for kind of individual parts of the words, which is oftentimes a struggle with our friends that are dyslexic. So I digress. My name is Dion Alexander. I am currently a senior product designer with Shift, which is a California-based online automotive retailer. So previous to this role, worked in a whole bunch of different industries. I've done telecommunications, sports, health and fitness, airlines, fintech, you sort of name it. I feel like I've been through it all. And it was actually the airline industry for me many, many years ago where I got my first taste of accessibility. I was actually asked to go in and make all of the PDFs on the site accessible. I had no clue what that meant, other than to sort of run the automated tests that Adobe Acrobat lets you run. And it tells you whether or not the PDF is accessible. It just kind of gives you check marks for image alt tags and tab order and things like that. And I became an expert in passing those tests. So I kind of just naturally became the accessibility guy. Turns out later, when I actually started using a screen reader, the experience of going through those PDFs, which had apparently passed, was atrocious. Like you couldn't get through them. And that was really like a groundbreaking moment for me of like, oh, interesting. You can run these automated tests and pass, but the experience is still a disaster. And so that kind of led me to start taking this a little bit more serious. So I started to attend some more training. And actually that Calgary UX event that I mentioned before, it was ran by Andrew Wright. And I don't know if he's on the call. I hope he is. Shout out to Andrew if you're here, but he ran through a presentation that was just incredible. There was one slide in it specifically, which Diana actually showed at the first installment of this accessibility and inclusive design series during her Accessibility 101 presentation. And I'm going to show it here again because I feel like it bears repeating. Yeah, this is basically a slide that is really able to quickly sort of foster a sense of empathy related to a mismatch, like mismatches and motivations across this sort of spectrum of permanent, temporary, and situational scenarios. So for me, there were a few that stuck out immediately the first time I saw this. And they had to do with the arm injury and the new parent. So at the time, I actually had a 2-month-old and was carrying him around all the time, and had also recently recovered from a shoulder injury. And so those ones, I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Like I remember the struggles that I went through with that. And all of a sudden now I could relate to what it may be like to have a permanent disability, like one arm. And so that was really fascinating to me. And then there's other ones here too. Like I did somewhat recently that same year have a pretty bad ear infection that impacted my hearing for a short time, where I start to understand the experience of what it might be like to be deaf in one ear. So it was just like mind blowing to me. And I just had to get more into it. So fast forward a little bit, and the last sort of major piece of my accessibility journey was when I met Scott here. We crossed paths at the same company, and was fortunate enough to not only work closely with Scott, but we've become really, really good friends over the years. So with that, Scott, I'll pass it over to you.
Right on. Thanks, Dion. There's always little tidbits that I haven't heard in his stories that he throws in. So I always reciprocate with something too. So it just kind of keeps it fresh. And we've done a whole number of these presentations for folks, and this is one of the ones we're most excited about, guys, because it's a little different than what we usually show. A little more anecdotal, lived experience. So I'm Scott Herron, as Luis and Dion have said. I'm Accessibility Program Manager at Benevity, which is a basically global now giving and corporate social responsibility group that helps many other companies with their ways for their employees to volunteer and give back. And great initiative. We are just in the midst of growing our accessibility practice, so kind of getting in on the ground floor. And since I'm a screen reader user, I kind of live in this world every day. So there's always lots of, experiences we can show off and iterate on, and done a lot of different things, probably quite a bit similar to Dion. Worked in sports, banking, lots of customer service. I've kind of been in this, let's make things usable for people with differing ability space. Man, a long, long time back before the internet was really a big, big thing. And, it's not just about the digital experience, but, enhancing other people's experiences if they go somewhere in person, right? How can we make that memorable for them? If they call somewhere, right? What workarounds do we have set up in place if somebody's hearing impaired, for example, or if someone is visually impaired and they can't read their statement, right? How are we set up to support them? So kind of how I got into this big time was that the bank I was working for prior to where Dion and I hooked up with each other and worked together for 4 great years. We were just launching our internet banking, and as everyone can probably envision, they tried to create the happy path for people as opposed to delving in to make the experience really usable. So since that was part of my role to be involved in that process desk side at first, it became a bigger project, but you just start asking the questions, right? Hey, how might we do this for other people? And it just kind of got people thinking. So then I progressed to another financial institution, whereas anyone who sees us on LinkedIn will see where Dion and I were connected. And we had the great pleasure to work together on a bunch of public front end projects, some of which were set up with acceptance criteria for compliance to the WCAG guidelines. Those are great experiences, and some of them were not so great because we didn't have buy-in to run those other projects that way. So we're going to kind of get into that a little bit later, but I just kind of wanted to level set that. And one other thing I'll just quickly mention before we jump on to the next item is this is totally a safe space. Dion and I have probably heard or been a part of many, many questions that you might, categorize as, gee, I feel uncomfortable asking that. This might be a stupid question. Trust us, nothing is a stupid question. If it's a question in your head, obviously it needs an answer, right? So you won't offend us. There's always lots of ways to reach out separately if a big group is not your thing. So just keep that in mind, okay? Dion, I'm going to shoot it over to fire up the next slide.
Sounds good. So yeah, quick little agenda for today. We're actually going to try to stay out of a presentation deck as much as we can here, and hopefully make this a bit more of a casual conversation with some hands-on demos. Like Scott said, this is a super safe space, and we really want to encourage everyone to participate, ask questions, and really get out of this what you want to get out of this. Scott and I, as he mentioned, do a more formal presentation slide deck that focuses on more kind of raising organizational awareness around accessibility. But what we're doing today has a slightly different focus since it's sort of the second piece of this accessibility and inclusivity series. So if you're brand new to accessibility, highly recommend going back into the archives of Calgary UX and checking out Diana's Accessibility 101. She did an incredible job. I think that was back in February, packed full of info, and it'll definitely get you off and running. So with that said, a couple topics we're planning on touching on as they relate to sort of the day-to-day life, sort of living in this world of accessibility and inclusive design. First one is we're gonna just chat a little bit about using curiosity to overcome some fears. Then we're going to get into some screen reader demos, and then we'll talk about strategies to sort of raise your organization's accessibility practice. We'll talk about how to stay up to date in the world of accessibility, which seems to be ever changing. And then we will sort of wrap up. We'll share some resources and hopefully have some time at the end for Q&A. So if that sounds good, and if there's no objections, which I don't think there are. Nope, no objections. All right, let's mosey on through. So topic number one there is, using curiosity to overcome fear. And I'm sure that we've all heard that sort of saying that, people fear what they don't understand. And I think that's largely true. As humans, we typically tend to sort of gravitate towards people who are like us. And as an accessibility champion, advocate, whatever you want to call yourself, I think it's crucial that we try to break out of that pattern and really challenge ourselves at living sort of outside of our comfort zones. Definitely easier said than done. I will be the first to admit that. And I'll share a story too about the first time that Scott and I got together for lunch. I feel it's important to share these feelings, to kind of normalize it and have this goal of sort of moving past them and growing as designers and as people. So what was I nervous about? To be honest, I didn't really know what Scott expected of me. So, we're going out for lunch and I'm like, I don't know, like, do I need to be guiding him down the hall? Should I be reading him the cafe menu? Like, what are the politically correct and incorrect things to say? Like, am I allowed to use the word blind? I had no idea. And thankfully, Scott, and I always appreciate, and I always thank you for this regularly, he created such a safe space, kind of the same space that we're trying to create right now, where you're free to ask questions. And, no matter how silly you sort of think it might be, we really encourage everyone to come from a place of genuine curiosity, because, you're going to get a good response no matter what. So I've really come to learn that all it takes is asking the question. So Scott, I'm trying to think of the questions that I had asked you that day. I know we had bonded over hockey, so we're both big Calgary Flames fans. And Scott had mentioned during that lunch that he had watched the game the night before. And I was like, Scott, like, forgive me, like, how do you watch and like experience a game? And maybe I'll actually ask you that question. You can answer that if you want.
Yeah, that was one of the good questions for sure. There were a bunch going back and forth, right? The questions of Dion too, but as far as sports and that kind of thing go, I always prefer the radio feed, because their mantra is to describe what's happening on the play, whereas opposed to the TV guy, oh, look at John Celebrity Q Public in row one there in the crowd, right? Well, then now you have no idea what's happening in the actual game. And to be totally honest, it doesn't really matter to me who's in the crowd being a celebrity or whatever else they've decided to focus on in the middle of the play at that moment in time. Sure, if you want to do that between when the play isn't happening, cool beans. But like someone who's sighted, I want to know what's happening in the actual event. So radio is much more preferable. Absolutely. What else did we talk about, Dean? We talked about like movies.
That answer was funny to me, because I was like, oh, like, of course it's the radio. Like I didn't, it was such an easy answer. And I was like, well, that benefits me as well. Like, if I'm driving somewhere, I can't be watching the game, and I prefer to listen to it on the radio, and it's a great experience. So what has been designed for an accessible experience really helps out everyone. So yeah, that was one of the first silly questions I had, but it turned into a great conversation. I think another question that I asked you was, is it appropriate for me to call you a person who is blind, or do you have some other sort of preference?
Yeah, that was another good one we talked about too. So like many of the other phrases in the world, this has evolved, and it doesn't bother me. Like, I could be a person who's blind, totally blind, differently abled. But you will find in your travels, as you guys circulate around your other groups of people, that it's always best to ask what terminology they like. because you'll find some folk just have a preference that something that they really have adopted as kind of their go-to term. So, you know what, it's just, you know, when in doubt, like just ask.
Yeah.
You know, there's no harm in ever asking the question, right? Like, the other one we first talked about, DM, before we ever sat down, like, you're like, so do I need to tell you the menu, right? Because we went to our local
Right.
in-house place, right? And it's such a hustling, bustling place. While you're standing in line, you kind of pick up what the special of the day is. But you know what, if that hadn't happened, then it would be like, okay, yeah, what's happening? What's, you know, or even like what looks good, right? You can see the stuff they've already got prepared. You know, I don't want to eat something that's gross and disgusting and not feel good for the rest of the day. So yeah, that was even before we sat down and, you know, started talking about you know, all that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
you know, these are all kind of questions, and no matter what the person with a different ability is you're dealing with, they may have specific different needs than someone who's blind like me, but you know, maybe they like have mobility challenges and they need you to open the door for them or that kind of stuff, right? Those are all kind of things to check in on.
Yeah. And people are generally very receptive and very happy to help. If you're coming from a genuine place of curiosity and understanding, ask the questions. Like it makes for a great discussion. Connect with another human. It's really the only way to go. You know, the flip side of that whole thing was really, you know, I could let the fears sort of creep in of like, I don't know what this experience is going to be like. You know what? I'm just going to go for lunch by myself and stay in my own little bubble and comfort zone where I won't actually grow as a designer or a person. And my point to this whole thing is really to try to fight that thinking and let curiosity take over. I guarantee you'll be better for it.
And you might meet someone who has a very self-deprecating sense of humor like me, who loves to make fun of
That
blind
helps a
things
lot.
and tell blind jokes all the time. And you know what? That's an important icebreaker that I wish more people that were differently abled like myself had in their toolkit. But you know, I use it to the best of my ability, and it really helps break down barriers for other humans. So
Yeah.
it's just the way I roll.
Nice. Well, let's we'll get off our soapboxes for now, and maybe we'll jump into a hands-on demo. So for those of you that have not seen or experienced a screen reader, we really want to just kind of share screen here. Scott's going to run you through a little example, a little scenario, and you can kind of get a feel for what it's like to actually use a screen reader. I will note that you know, if you have seen these videos on YouTube, what typically happens is they will slow down the voiceover. So you're getting a very easy to comprehend voice playback. Now, in the real world, you know, Scott is an expert with this voice. He hears it sort of all day, every day. And so we're going to play it at full speed the same way he experiences it. If you guys need to, if you want it slowed down, like you can't understand it at all, we can certainly do that. But we kind of want to give you the real feel for it here. So Scott, feel free to share screen and take over.
And we're not going to play like a whole web page of content for anybody. So
yeah,
you know what, they're going to be like a couple of page banners will probably be the longest piece we let you hear. There'll be some, you know, menu options and that kind of stuff. So, which you should all be able to see. So that will, you know, make the experience kind of, you know, easier for you guys to follow that way. But yeah, if it's a hard stop for people, like just shout out and we can slow it down. So maybe Anya or Luis can watch the chat if that's a hard stop for anybody. So, okay, I got to work some magic over here. Dion, have you stopped screen share so I can take over?
I have. Yep.
Okay,
You're good to go.
right on. Zoom is not the most accessible experience, friends, so it often doesn't tell you when things have changed in that environment. It's supposed to, but it just isn't quite that interactive all the time. So just thought you might want to know that. Okay.
Screen share. Participants can now see your screen.
So there says participants can now see my screen, and hopefully you could hear that audio piece as well.
Yep, we can.
Okay, so I'm going to jump to a website
Google and one more page
here.
Virtual piece.
I just put us on the main Google page for now.
Google
right?
account,
But
Scott Aaron, left parent, Flamis fan since 1980 at gmail.com, right parent button.
there, now you know my association with the Flames even more so, ... Okay, so here we're just gonna jump to this website, which is a pretty darn good example of thoughtfully building something that is accessibility compliant, but yet usable. So kind of going above the WCAG guidelines that are laid out on W3C.
Alt D, app bar toolbar, PARALYMPIC, period, ORG, enter, loading page. Blank. Loading complete. Page has 1 frame, 7 regions, 33 headings, and 59 links. International Paralympic Committee, vertical bar IPC, skip to main content button, content.
So a couple of nice transition features there, right? Told us
Roger
it
P has
was
joined the meeting.
loading the page and that the page load was complete. Sorry, Zoom is going to talk in the background here, friends, if people come and go from the meeting space, but can't really disable it from here. So just in case you hear random stuff, that's why. So this, I put us on the header here.
International Paralympic Committee, vertical bar IPC.
So a little bit verbose, but not too much, right? There's a little bit of content-y stuff going on there. And they've done a couple of good things on this site. They built an accessibility menu that we're going to take a look at here in a minute, but I'm going to take us to another page that's a little less cluttered so you guys can get a better visual experience when we start to manipulate some settings here.
Quick accessibility menu, skip to main content with virtual, enable accessibility for visually impaired, application mode, virtual, open the accessibility menu button.
Okay.
Open the accessible navigation menu button.
This looks like the right one, Dion, if I'm remembering correctly here, my friend.
Yep, we'll go to the
Join the
Paralympic
meeting.
Games page.
Enter, International Paralympic Committee, vertical bar IPC, International Paralympic Committee, vertical bar IPC, links tab button.
So dumped us into the actual list of links.
Skip to main content dash opens a new tab, same page, link visited. IPC new logo dash opens a new, English dash opens a new tab link. Espanol dash opens a new tab link. Visit the Paralympics on Facebook dash opens, visit the Paralympics on Instagram dash opens in a new tab link.
So I just stopped for a sec because it's nice that it tells you when you click on these links, it's going to open in a new tab. Like that's great for any user experience. You know, otherwise you might think, hey, what's happening here? Why is a new page opening if you didn't know that?
Visit the Paralympics on Twitter dash opens in a new, visit the Paralympics on YouTube dash, visit the Paralympics on TikTok dash open, Paralympic Games dash opens a new tab link.
Okay, here's the one we want. So it told me you're going to open a new tab, so I'm prepared for that.
Enter, loading page, blank. Loading complete. Page has 7 regions, 24 headings, and 45 links. Paralympic.
I won't play the whole page because if I just let it speak, it would go through all 45 links on the page. So let's not do that.
Yeah.
Shall we jump into the accessibility menu, Dion?
I
And
think
we'll show
so.
all
Yeah.
these mates, all the oodles of options we have in this menu. There's
I
a
think
lot
so.
of them.
Quick accessibility menu. Skip with virtual. Enable accessibility for visually. Application mode. Virtual.
Okay, I'm not going to pick the enable accessibility for visually impaired because that just changes some settings that they have done some research on and found that they're the most popular that people with different types of visual impairments would use. So we're just going to go into the main accessibility menu.
Open the accessibility menu button.
That sounds like it.
Enter. Paralympic Games vertical bar winter summer past. Paralympic Games vertical bar winter summer past. Future Paralympics accessibility menu. User way accessibility menu frame. Main region. Screen reader toggle button.
And I'm just going to jump in for a quick second here. So there's a lot of controversy around using accessibility overlays like this. So this is a service called Userway that you can basically install on your website, and it kind of acts as like a skin over top of your website. A lot of people don't like it because it can sometimes be considered a band-aid approach to accessibility rather than baking it into your process. We're not going to get into any of that, like the pros and cons of that stuff. But what we do want to show here is just some of the accessibility features that are available beyond your typical stuff of like ensuring that your header hierarchy is correct and that there's image alt tags. So really just want to sort of show some of the features where we can start expanding our ideas of how we can be a little bit more accessible.
Let me just tie onto that. One other quick sort of shell overlay comment is it can work well. Friends, some of their bigger clients at Userway have baked, accessibility all throughout their process. So acceptance criteria, epics, definition of ready, definition of done. So what they built behind this overlay is a really solid, accessible, usable experience. And then putting an overlay on top of that can work well. But if you just put it on, as a shell, thinking it's going to fix all your accessibility challenges, that's where the kind of the controversy kicks in for humans. because it doesn't do that, right? It's just there to make sure that all the options, as many as possible, are available for all sorts of different user groups.
Yeah, exactly. So the first option that we are looking at here, which is highlighted, is a screen reader option. So this is really interesting because what you actually do is if you toggle this on, it will turn on this website's own personal screen reader. So that's decoupled from sort of any screen reading software. We're not going to enable that right now. Scott has JAWS running, which is a different software. So we would have two voices going at once. So where this gets really interesting actually is if you were to pop this site open on your phone or on your iPad or something like that, and then turn it on from there. It's just a really quick and easy way to turn on a screen reader rather than fumbling through the settings of the iPhone or Android to turn on the voice accessibility. So really cool that they've implemented this into a website. But
it's quite usable. Yeah, we won't turn it on because I don't need any more voices in my head. Trust me. But yeah, it's quite interactive. Like when we've turned it on before, it does a good job of reading. You have an ability to control the speed and that kind of thing, so it doesn't come out at a million miles an hour. It is quite usable, and there are different screen readers available. Like JAWS that I'm running here does have a demo version that you could pull off Freedom Scientific. NVDA is a fully open source free screen reader that you can download off the web. The only problem with that one is because it's open source, you aren't permitted to run it on a lot of company networks or educational institutions. So, if you're going to load something up on a device, just make sure you talk to your security and IT folks. You don't want to come up on a red flag list somewhere for something that shouldn't happen.
You got that right. Sorry, I was caught reading some questions. We have some awesome questions in the chat that we'll definitely circle back to and make sure we answer at the end here. So Scott, if we can go to the next option.
So yeah, I'm just going to arrow through here because if I tab, it'll take me out of this menu. Typically, if you want to go through active elements on a page, you would tab and shift tab between them. But because we're in a menu already, it just requires that we arrow. So here we go.
Contrast plus toggle button.
So here's a contrast.
So let's turn that one on.
And this one's pretty dramatic. I think you guys will see the difference.
Enter invert colors toggle button pressed.
Yeah, so we get a full inversion of the colors. Some people may prefer that. It might be easier for them to read. And you'll see that there's sort of three options. This is the first of three. So Scott, if you press enter again.
Yeah, so it tells me invert colors, but listen what happens when I press it again.
Enter. Invert colors toggle button pressed.
So just invert colors again, right? So even though your visual, layout has changed, I have no idea that that's changed, right? So great that they gave me this toggle option, but a little layer of usability would be preferred to make it fully usable for someone with just a screen reader.
Yeah, exactly that. And so what we can see here is that it's changed to the second option, which is dark contrast, similar to the first one, but a bit of a different approach. And then if you go to the next one there, Scott.
There is one more.
Enter. Invert colors toggle button pressed.
We'll still invert colors, right? But it will be different for you guys now.
Yeah, there you go. So we'll flip that one off.
So we'll push this and it'll tell us the toggle button is not pressed anymore in 1 second.
Enter toggle button not pressed. Contrast plus.
So that's good, right? Tells us I'm out of that option. That's very thoughtful and usable. So, great way that they've thought about building that part.
So we'll skip the next one. It's smart contrast, very similar to what we just went through,
Contrast
but just for the sake of time, let's go to the next one, which is highlight links.
This will be pretty visible for most people, I think, when we click this one.
Enter highlight links toggle button pressed.
Yeah, so obviously adds that black background there behind all of the clickable elements and highlights them with yellow. A little bit more contrast to see those interactive elements there. So we can turn that one off. That's just toggle on and off.
Highlight links.
Yeah, so that one's easy, only on and off, right?
And this next one is pretty interesting. So if we go to
bigger text toggle button.
Oh yeah, okay, this is interesting. Okay, bigger text.
Enter bigger text toggle button pressed.
So we have bigger text, and if you do it again.
Enter. Bigger text toggle button pressed.
So just the same thing, right? Doesn't tell me that it's gotten any larger, although I know from being around designers and devs,
Remaining up to the
that's
left of
what
meeting.
happens, right? You have these different sizes you can incorporate.
So, and this for Scott's experience here, there's no indication of how many levels there are. We can see that there's sort of 4 different levels for the text sizing, but again, he's sort of left in a guessing game. Great feature. It's awesome that they have this, but again, these are kind of the small improvements that are always available. You can always sort of improve on a lot of these features. So Scott will increase the size again.
Yeah.
2 more
Enter.
times.
Bigger text toggle button pressed.
There's
One
the
more.
third one.
Enter. Bigger text toggle button
And
pressed.
I'll mention here too that, a lot of us know the keyboard shortcuts of like Command plus or Control plus to increase the size of text. That's not common knowledge. Like I know my parents, for example, would never, ever know that. So when they're navigating these sites, if they see an option like this, it actually is quite beneficial. And I don't think it's a bad thing to have 2 ways of doing something. So sure, we can Command plus and increase the size on our system if we want to, or there's another option here that may be a little bit more accessible and easier for others to use. So again, I like this feature. It's pretty cool to see.
So let's jump out of this one and we'll go to the next one, Dion.
Enter toggle button pressed. Bigger text.
There, we're out of that one. And I think there's one more we wanted to touch on down the list here, right?
Yeah, so let's go to the next one, which is text spacing. Just
Text spacing toggle button.
This one's pretty straightforward, but
Enter light spacing toggle button pressed.
Oh yeah, so
Yeah.
light spacing. There are more options in here, which I won't know.
Yeah, and this is again for reading comprehension. Some people may find it easier to read walls of text when it's spaced out like this. So we're in light spacing. Of course, Scott, there's no indication for you that there's 3 levels to this, but if you press enter 3 more times, it'll take you out of this one.
Enter light spacing toggle button pressed.
So this is a good cognitive load piece too, right? Where this might make it a lot easier for people to process that, have trouble digesting that huge amount of information that is thrown at them so quickly on many, many websites.
Enter toggle button not pressed. Text spacing.
So they're out of text spacing.
So we'll skip the next one. The next one is pause animations. And this can be a good one for those that suffer from seizures. If there's a hero banner that's scrolling and changing every 3 seconds, you might want to pause that. Or if you have a parallax scrolling on your site, you may want to disable that for some folks. So kind of a nice feature to have there as well. But of course, there's no animation on this site, so we're not going to see any difference. So we can skip over that one.
Pause animations toggle button. Dyslexia friendly toggle button.
And here's an interesting one.
Yeah.
So many more people than you might think actually have dyslexia. So this is quite a well thought out feature that I think we're going to find that'll become more and more common as the world continues to evolve and people want to be able to do everything digitally.
Yep. Let's flip that one on.
Enter dyslexia friendly toggle button pressed.
So this one's really interesting. And this is actually a much better font than the Comic Sans that I chose in the presentation. Google doesn't have this font, so we couldn't add that one into our presentation. But what's interesting about a dyslexic specific font is that it's designed in a way where each letter is as distinct and unique as possible. It's just a really great way to help someone with the decoding of words. And the choice of font has a huge impact on that. So this is a really cool example of inclusive accessible design and designing for neurodiversity. So typically when we think of accessibility, it's often visual impairments, mobility issues, things like that. This is a good neurodiversity example.
Yeah, right on. Okay, let's just cycle through because we got a couple of
dyslexia friendly toggle button pressed.
So we know we're in here.
Enter. Legible fonts toggle button pressed.
So then we get a legible fonts, which will be just a little bit different display mode.
Enter toggle button not pressed. Dyslexia friendly.
And we're out of dyslexia friendly.
Go. Okay, so let's, I can't remember what the next one on the list is.
Toggle button.
Cursor.
It doesn't show us, it's kind of hidden right now.
Is it? Oh yeah.
Keep going to the next one.
Toggle button.
Tooltips, which we wouldn't really see much about on here.
Stalin has left the meeting. Page structure toggle button.
Page structure might be interesting to show them, Dion.
Actually, let's quickly show them the cursor one. We'll do the cursor one.
Cursor toggle button.
Cursor.
Enter big cursor toggle button pressed.
Oh yeah, big cursor.
Yeah. So Scott, if you can move your mouse on the trackpad.
Yeah, one sec. Did it go
Go
down?
up a little bit. There it is. So you can see in the bottom left corner there that the cursor is bigger. We've just changed the size of the cursor. So again, you can do this. You can fumble through your system settings and do stuff like this. But to have this feature kind of at a page level is just a really nice option to have. Again, it's two ways to sort of do the same thing.
Big cursor.
We'll just toggle
Enter.
through.
Reading mask toggle button pressed.
So reading mask, just a little bit different. Here, I'll move the trackpad.
Yeah, so what's happening here is it's darkening everything outside of where your mouse is so that you're able to easily highlight and focus on whatever piece of information you're currently reading. So as your mouse moves, it's going to move with you.
So
And I think there's a lighter version of this with the next option.
Yeah, I think so.
Enter. Reading guide toggle button pressed.
Reading guide here. Let's.
So if you move your mouse, you can see it's just basically giving you a bigger cursor. It's giving you this large line where you can just easily see sort of where your cursor is, where your reading line is, and that moves as you move your mouse. So kind of cool to see that as well. So I think we can probably skip over the rest of these. There's tooltips, there's page structure, where if you want to just go through the headers and kind of get a look into the code. Line height, very similar to letter spacing. Text align, so those walls of text that we saw that are typically left aligned, you can change it to center, you can change it to right justified, whole bunch of different options there to suit your preference. Saturation, yeah.
Saturation's the other one.
Color blindness, what have you, like there's a lot of options here. And again, the point of this is to really show that accessibility features go beyond just the image alt tags and the hierarchy of headers, which kind of gets the spotlight all the time. And I really like showing this. We love showing this just to sort of get that innovation sort of spinning in your heads of like, hey, you know, we can go beyond, we can provide a more in-depth accessible experience if we really think about it.
Yeah, exactly. What else do we need to consider, especially with more and more people getting access to devices around the world, thankfully.
So one kind of interesting thing as a UX designer, it's like, hey, this is great. This overlay works awesome. Like, what are some ways that we can make this feature, these options, even better? So Scott, what I'll have you do is maybe tab down to reset all, just to make sure that we've wiped all of these.
Toggle button, stretch line, toggle, text align, toggle button, saturation, toggle, reset all button.
Here we go. We'll do a reset.
Enter, reset all button.
Cool. And let's refresh the page.
Because it didn't tell me that it reset successfully, right?
Did
It
not
just,
give you any
it
indication. Yes.
no indication. So if I worked for Userway, I would have some feedback for sure. As my Benevity friends that are on this call know, that feedback is required often to help guide our folks down the path. Okay, so refreshing.
F5, refreshing page, loading page, Paralympic Games, vertical bar, winter, summer, past, future Paralympics, blank, loading complete, page has 7 regions, 24 headings and 46 links, Paralympics.
All right, we don't need to listen to the whole page layout.
Cool. So for some reason it scrolls you halfway down the page, but that's
yeah, this
okay.
is weird, eh? Like that it does that when it reloads.
So if you go into your hidden accessibility menu, and this pops up when Scott hits tab, like the first option that comes
accessibility
up
menu, skip the main content button.
is a skip to main
Application mode,
content.
virtual, enable accessibility for application, open the accessibility menu button.
So there I get this prompt to open the accessibility menu.
So we don't want the
Paralympic
menu.
Games, vertical bar. Paralympic Games, vertical bar, winter, summer.
Did I hit the wrong one?
Unlabeled one.
Yeah, I did. Okay, let me go back.
Paralympic Games, quick accessibility menu, skip the main content button.
That's the one we want, right? The quick accessibility menu.
Press tab again.
Enable accessibility for visually impaired button.
This one.
There's this one. Okay.
Enter. Paralympic Games, vertical bar, winter, summer, past, future Paralympics, user-way accessibility menu frame, main region, search Merriam-web.
So what just happened there is, and I have no idea how they came up with the configuration, but it applied sort of a default set of accessibility features. So we just ran through a whole bunch of them, and you can see that there's some random ones sort of checked off right now. So they have bigger text going, they have legible fonts, they have paused animations. This must be from some sort of data of the most used features, but this gives a very, very quick shortcut into applying a standard set of accessibility options for this site, rather than doing what we just did, which is going into each individual setting one by one. It's great that we have all those settings, but it's time consuming. So to have this sort of shortcut of like, hey, just hit me with a few your standard sort of configuration and let me go on about my business. So great shortcut. How they came to choose
Who
all these
knows?
ones, I have no idea.
But alternatives are great, right? Like give a user a choice. Go through and customize your settings as you want, or here's a shortcut. Try this out. Does this work for you?
Beautiful. Okay, sweet. So let's if we have time at the end of all this, if somebody has an experience that they want Scott to run through with his screen reader, we can hang on after and do just that. But maybe for the sake of time, we'll close out this demo and move along.
We'll go give Dion the screen back.
International Paralympic Committee verdict visited link
Oh, extra tab, forgot.
meeting control mute currently unmuted alt S.
There
Here
we
we
go.
go. Goodbye, voice. The next sort of topic on the agenda is accessibility strategies. And I know, Scott, you have some thoughts around accessibility criteria and definition of done. So I'll pass that over to you to kick us off on this.
Yeah, let's start kind of as I teased when I was doing my intro. Dion and I were quite happily tied to a project where every epic, every story had to be verified that it was accessible and usable. So in essence, it became acceptance criteria, part of the definition of ready and definition of done. So this was great because we actually had a couple of QA testers that would do the testing for us with multiple different disabilities like screen magnification, JAWS. If there was any content for people that had hearing disabilities, they would make sure that was configured properly. Didn't get as far as dyslexia in that project, but a lot of other very thoughtful things were done about color contrast, obviously all the ARIA labeling that needed to take place and that kind of thing. So that's the good side and the critical point about defining acceptance criteria. The other key tie into that that we've probably all experienced or seen in our organizations is none of this happens without executive buy-in, right? So, and you can even have executive buy-in and then still somehow it can get pushed down the priority list, put into the backlog. So we know together that all avoids a bunch of rework if we do it right the first time. So trying to evangelize and communicate that message to all the important stakeholders is where there's always like strength in numbers. That's where it's good to have your other sort of allies in the organization with you that can advocate and share that message. I think that's super important. And if you're stuck in a project where it is accessibility has not been prioritized, that's where we need to show examples like this. Or one other thing I'm just going to quickly go on a quick tangent, Dion, but one thing I've done at my current gig is, sure, it's easy for me to go in and drive around on a website and go through an experience, but what I've started to get our developers and designers to do is actually turn on like voiceover or whatever they've got going on for a screen reader experience, cover their eyes up, block their screen, whatever works for them, and then you try and do something, right? Like log in, go check your email, go through a flow, say you want to make a contribution to something or make a purchase. Try that without having vision, even though you know the experience when you can see it. And then that's a huge empathy building exercise, right? So great way to obtain buy-in, build empathy, and certainly helps people to have that greater understanding of, man, sometimes this is not good. This is not what I envisioned it was going to be. So I'll shoot it over to Dion to add on some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear buy-in, it gives me shivers. I feel like we fight the good fight all the time, and it's all about buy-in. Like you really need it from the executives all the way down. And in my opinion, I think one of the most sort of important strategies for an organization is ensuring that they have accessibility champions. So a person or persons who sort of take leadership of supporting the culture shift that really needs to happen to embrace accessibility and inclusivity within the organization. So I know that there's more and more companies that are carving out like specific accessibility roles. I've never been fortunate enough to work in one of these, but there's, we have accessibility specialists now, accessibility engineers. You even have roles like VPs of accessibility and inclusive design, which is fantastic. I don't think that's the case for the large majority of the companies that we're all working in. So it's up to each and every one of us to really take that leadership on, in addition to our day-to-day life. And actually, maybe I'll pause there. Is there anyone in the room right now that has an accessibility specific role? I'm very curious if there is. I would love you to jump off mute and chat with us. I would love to hear what your role is and what you sort of do day to day. And I suspect there's only 70 of us or so.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty rare to have one of those roles. Like I say, it's rare to come across these people, or these organizations rather. So I think that's kind of the proof right there that the onus is really on all of us. I think for a lot of designers specifically, the word leader can be a little bit intimidating. We're not talking about a leader in that you have to be an accessibility expert who is writing books and doing TED Talks or anything like that. An accessibility champion can really, lead from the front, lead from the back, lead from the side. And oftentimes, at least in my personal experience, I've found that sort of the one-on-one conversations or small group conversations when you're simply trying to get accessibility on everyone's radar are the really, really meaningful conversations that need to happen. And you start to get a little bit of a following, and then now there's 2, 3, 4 of you. Now you have a little team, and you start doing lunch and learns, and you can really build the group up quite quickly. And once you get the momentum, it's really, really hard to ignore. So yeah, just simply ensuring that accessibility is on the radar of your partners, whether it's researchers, stakeholders, developers, QA, you name it. We're all capable of being that leader that can start that change. And yeah, it's really, again, on us, regardless of what our role is. So
just a quick research shout out, Dion. I know our research friends love to have diversity in their panels, whether they do moderated or unmoderated research. But getting those diverse perspectives to be able to participate, throughout the research, experience is super important, right? So you might have 5, 6, 7 people as part of your research panel, but an ideal goal would be to have, someone with different abilities represented within that panel experience, so you can get that perspective to the table.
Absolutely, and that's a gap that I see in 99% of the projects that I work on. We choose our user group that we're going to run through usability testing or research, whatever we're doing. All it really takes is to bring in one diverse perspective. That's all it takes to really start thinking about this. So if you're testing with 5 users, for example, fight for one more and bring in a different perspective, and to really give that voice a platform, because when stakeholders hear real feedback, that makes a huge impact for building empathy. When they see and hear from a diverse perspective, all of a sudden that empathy it's very, very hard to ignore. And especially in this software world that we're living in, it's very data driven, which is great, but bringing a diverse voice into the conversation with real emotion, real experience, can just have a massive, massive impact. So I think it's crucial to give these voices a platform, and it can start as easy as that of hey, can we expand this user group to 6 and bring in somebody from wherever? Yeah.
Because over 15% of our world's population identifies as being differently abled, right? And of course, there'll be more than that haven't identified that. So we're talking about 1.2 billion plus people. So they have money to spend as well, right? So why wouldn't you want to include them in your user research and your research panels and all those kinds of things? Their perspective is as valued as anyone else's. Okay, I'm getting off my soapbox now.
Absolutely. All right. So the next topic that we're going to talk about is sharpening your accessibility skills. So Scott, what do you do to sort of stay on top of this sort of ever constantly changing world?
So there's lots of cool resources out there. Your network with your friends is critical. People that on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever your medium that you jump on and talk to folks through is important. Just went to the DQ systems, DEQE systems, CXcon a conference about a month ago. I have so many great pieces saved in my calendar from that event. I haven't even caught up yet. There's just so much great content. They were very inclusive, everything from accessible design to accessible developing, gaming, strategy, how to, go through building up your accessibility practice within your organization. So tons of great content there. I know Dion has some others, so I'm going to leave a couple for him to talk about, and then we're going to share some resources with you guys at the end of this too.
Yeah. So for me, yeah, I mean, I try to read as many articles as I can, but I really get motivated and inspired by looking in the real world for inspiration. So like urban architecture to me is fascinating. So if you go to a train station or look at a sidewalk and you see the textures changing, like that is all intentionally designed to help with accessibility. And it's fascinating to me. That's been around for a lot longer than digital accessibility. So love that sort of stuff. I know there was an experience that Scott and I found online actually that was showing, I think it was in New Zealand. There was this big, huge, long bridge, beautiful, beautiful scenery. And along the railing of the bridge was this Braille story that told whoever was kind of running their hand along the railing, told them about what is happening here, like what's going on around here, what is the scenery like. And I just thought that was mind blowing, where I'm like, that is such a cool idea. So anybody with a visual impairment that knows Braille can walk along this bridge and just have such a better experience than just trying to walk across the bridge as they normally would without that. So that one was super cool to me. That one actually sparked an interesting conversation between Scott and I, where I was like, Scott, can you explain to me Braille? Like, I just don't get it, how it works. And so Scott, you had showed me your keyboard, and it was using, I don't know if you have the keyboard there, do you?
I have one handy right here. So just to kind of tie on to Dion's bridge story, I mean, that's super inclusive and creates that true sense of belonging, right? So here's a Brailler.
So if you hold it up a little bit higher.
Nice. Yeah, thanks, bud.
So three keys in a
three keys in a space. The big one is a space, and then the two outside keys, that moves your line down, and that's your backspace. So instead of 26 characters, you get 6 to make up the combination of the dots of the alphabet. So that was one of the first things I learned in school was, hey, you're going to have to learn how to use Braille, and you're going to have to know how to type. So, one of the great tools. Not many blind people use Braille anymore, actually. They've all kind of gone the digital way. So it's a great medium, but you know what, just not enough people still use it anymore.
Yeah. And so I thought this was fascinating. So I'm like, okay, so how do you make the full alphabet using just 6 keys? And so this is called 6 dot. There's also a 9 dot variation of Braille, but it got me to start learning it. And so there's these sort of combinations that you put in that allow you to press, 3 different keys, and it will give you a or a B or whatever. So I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And I started to learn Braille. And, I really like to dive into the experience myself. And so what I've been sort of experiencing lately, and I'll try to show you, I don't know if this will come through for you guys, but I'm going to turn on the accessibility feature of my phone, and let me just unplug here so you can hear.
Yeah, I wonder if this will work.
So I have the shortcut to turn it on. So
voiceover on.
I've got the voiceover on, and what you can do is you can change it to, there's a whole bunch of different accessibility features, and I'll try to get to it here.
Braille screen input.
So the Braille screen
There's your brain
here.
Yeah.
So now that I've kind of got this, like a little bit of the 6 dot down, I'll show you the sort of combination that you can write. So if I went, I don't even know. I think
B, F, C, L.
I'm out of practice. I was actually trying to write hello, and I didn't come anywhere close. So I'm definitely out of practice here, but oh, sorry, I was
tabletop mode.
Can you guys see it now? Can you guys see it there? Hopefully.
H,
There's an H,
E,
E,
L,
L.
semicolon.
Uh-oh.
Hell.
Close.
H-E-L-L.
O,
There you go.
There you go.
H-E-L-L-O. So I kind of got to writing hello. I need a little bit more practice, obviously, but that's just been something that's fascinating to me of like, this is how we can sort of deepen our experience with accessibility by actually like trying this stuff out. You know, we don't just have to go and read about it, like go and learn it. It's a fascinating way to really get interested in this space. And then you can start to take those learnings into your designs and into your conversations, and it really sort of deepens the conversation. So with that, maybe I will just quickly share a couple of resources here. I know we're sort of at time, so I'll share some resources to kind of wrap up the formal portion of this presentation. And if you have to drop, feel free. We are going to hang back. Like I said, we're here for some Q&A, or if you want Scott to run through an experience online, think about what you want to see. But let me just quickly share out some resources, and I will be sure to connect with Luis about getting these resources out to everyone. But just a couple of the resources that we often rely on. I know Scott mentioned WCAG a whole bunch of times. There's A11Y project for design systems. The Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit is great. IBM Carbon Design, Shopify Polaris. There's a bunch of free screen readers available, great communities. So yeah, the UX Calgary is great. Like I've asked a ton of accessibility questions and had some awesome answers. So shout out to the UX Calgary community. Conferences that Scott had mentioned, there's some really great ones. The inclusive usability testing. So here in Calgary, there is a company or organization called IncluCity Calgary. And what they do is they have just a diverse range of users that can help you test your products. And same with Make It Fable. I think it's fable.com. It's basically like usertesting.com, but with users of differing abilities. So very easy way to pull in users. If you're like, hey, you know what, we have 5 users for this testing, we want to add in one more diverse perspective. These are great sites to go to pull in that one diverse user. Hopefully more, but if you just need
hopefully more.
Then of course there's us, all that. Scott
yeah.
and I are definitely here to help out anytime. And you can catch us on LinkedIn or Slack or email. We'll be sure to send out our contact details. But
yeah, but this has been awesome, everyone. That's sort of our formal, but
Scott, I think you're on mute right now.
Am I? Oh, let me check.
No, it's Dion's.
Was it me?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't plug back in. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we could.
Okay.
As long as you could hear me, that's good.
Yeah. So okay, that was funky and cool.
There
the
we
world of technology. So thanks to everyone for hanging out. It's been a great sort of chat, but we'd love to answer any questions or comments folks have. Dion was already sort of gleaning the chat a bit, but happy to stick around and banter some more by all means if that works for people's time constraints. So.
Yeah, please. I will send the resources that you're sharing by either the ADP list. It has a mailing, blast mailing feature over there. And also a Meetup has another possibility to follow up over there. If you have any resources that you find really interesting, please put them in the chat. I think it will be nice to have a pool of really cool things that you can start applying right away. And yeah, what can I say, for everybody that stayed for this hour, I thank you so much. I still will encourage you to stay here and listen to the questions that some of us have. And for this Q&A section, we're going to invite people to present their questions. We have some of the questions in the chat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prompt that person that helped us by writing that question. But I will ask that person to use their own voice, use their own words. Hopefully that question is going to be short enough for us to add as many as we can. So please be mindful of the conversation. So I'm going to start with Murray. Murray had quite a lot of questions over here. So if you don't mind, Murray, do you want to to bring some of them, and yeah, maybe give some context on that.
Sure, yeah, I'll just choose one of them maybe. See, I guess one thing I was just wondering is not everybody is an expert, right? So I guess if we're looking for folks, involving more folks in the testing process, I'm wondering, yeah, how we could get diversity in that experience side too, but also kind of curious about what do folks do when they run into barriers a lot? Do people essentially give up? Do they seek out help to have someone help them with that process? Do they have to go through other channels? Like what happens if something fails for people? What I guess, and is it any different than if it fails for the general population?
Do you want me to go first, Dion, and then you tag on, my
You
friend?
go for it. Yes, you go for it.
So, hey, Murray, I know it's you from IncluCity Calgary, buddy. Thanks for coming out. Yes, I recognize the voice. So
Thanks.
something better than recognizes people's faces. So, yeah, kind of as far as the kind of giving up to seeking assistance, just kind of trying to, trundle through themselves. I think they run the gamut, right? Often people will just give up because it's not the happy path for them. So sometimes it's just too frustrating, and maybe they don't have that support readily available. So sometimes that can cause them to feel overwhelmed and not feel like they are in a space where they can reach out and seek out that help. So I think that's where it's important that we partner with different agencies, right, who have these support systems in place, so that, maybe if we want somebody to be part of a panel, maybe we know they need an assistant to kind of help them go through and be able to fully partake in the process, right? And then we get the data points that we need and get that diverse perspective in the room. So those would be kind of my, kind of elevator 30-second kind of thoughts on that. But Dion, I don't want to add on to that too.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be differing abilities. Like even if there's the same impairment, let's say we're talking about people who are blind, Scott is able to rip through a lot of this stuff. He's experienced with it. He can go through really fast, but you compare that to somebody who has been blind for a week. It's going to be a completely different experience with them. So just the same way that we're testing with our users with varying skills and abilities, like if you guys are going to test an app with me versus my parents, you're going to get very different results. The same, and this is why it's so important to, I've said a few times, like just include one, just pull one into your testing. Mm-hmm. We actually need more, ideally, but one at least gets the ball rolling. So
cool. Thank you.
Good questions. Did we answer all of them? I think there's
no, I'll have more, but I'll let other people get to
okay. Yeah. Circle back, Murray. Come back for part 2.
Yeah. Classic. So, well, I can see Avi Longworth is on the chat, and you have a really good question over there. Would you like to turn on your camera and start the conversation?
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm not going to turn on my camera because I am sick at the moment and I look it. But I did have a question, actually, Scott, about your hardware setup. Just like what the equipment is that you're working with. I'm just really curious, like, do you have a monitor? Do you have, like, I know you showed your keyboard is like, and you said it had Braille. I'm just really curious about what the equipment is that you're working with.
No, that's a good question, Abby. So regular keyboard, no fancy marks on it. This is a Windows laptop. Yeah, there's a monitor hooked up, but I could really care less if it's turned on, to tell you the truth. I do leave it on for others though, right? Just in case, I get stuck in a keyboard trap and I can't get out. So, pretty much a standard laptop. The only thing I've really done to augment it is put JAWS for Windows on. And then.
And you mentioned that a couple of times. What is that? That's not, I'm very new to this. I'm still a student, so I don't know.
Hey, it's all good. It's a screen reader. So like you heard when we went to the website, its task is, so if I was typing, it would read what I was typing, and then whatever the browser outputs when I go there and tab around or arrow around, that's what it reads out for me.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
No
I think
worries.
Jaws lets you change like the voice and the
Oh, yeah.
speed, and you can customize it a whole bunch. And yeah, it's the
Yeah,
software that
there's a whole
runs
bunch.
that voice.
There's different languages in the new version. The 2022 has about 17 languages in it now, so
Yeah.
it's come a long
I
way.
I will mention too about hardware. A while back, Scott, when you and I were working together, do you remember we had that microphone that we bought so that
Mhm.
when you shared your screen and presented, people could actually hear the voice playback out of Scott's speakers? We really struggled with getting the audio through to everyone. But then Zoom and I believe Google Meet as well. I haven't been on Google Meet as much lately,
Yeah,
but
me neither.
Zoom introduced the option to share a tab and share your audio. And I'm pretty sure that was a feature for when people are playing videos like YouTube videos and things like that, as an easier way to share your audio. But that just so happened to be a great accessibility feature and solved all our problems with audio. So now we don't have to use that clunky big mic that we would set up. So yeah, that is not part of your hardware setup anymore, which is nice.
Yeah, less things to carry around is always good in the
Exactly.
backpack.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much.
I hope you
Very
feel better
good.
soon.
Yeah, feel better.
Thanks.
Thank you for staying. If feeling sick, yeah, please take a nap after this. All right, we have we have Tiffany. Tiffany, I can see you're on camera. Please, would you like to pose your question?
Yeah, hey guys. I want to know, I just have to read my question to find it. You were showing the user way accessibility menu, and I was wondering if they share any analytics or anything about how many people have this on their website, which of those features are the most commonly selected, anything like that. If you know, maybe you don't know because you haven't looked for it, but
I haven't looked, although I stumbled across that they have a demo that they will offer to any company. So I assume we could certainly get analytics from them pretty easily.
My friend Tiffany, hello. Long time no
hello,
see.
Tiff. Long time no talk. We talked this afternoon in
Good to
another
see
meeting.
you. Yeah. And
to
my
see you.
perspective. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, I would just think it's
Oh, hello. My perspective, I've never actually used UserWay. Like I've never applied that overlay to any of the sites or projects that I've worked on, but I imagine they have some data around it, especially like that feature, that shortcut that we showed where you just kind of blanket turn on a whole bunch of different ones. There's got to be some data backing up which ones they've turned on. I imagine they share that and probably let their clients customize it the way they see fit based on the data that they've had. So I'd be very surprised if they don't share it, but I've not seen it myself.
I'm looking on their website right now as I talk to you guys. Yes, I'm multitasking. I do it all day. It's not on the main page, but that certainly doesn't, I mean, they're tied to some really big, platforms on here. So I'm pretty confident they've got to have a way to get to their analytics section.
By the way, I've seen Scott or heard Scott multitask before, and it is unbelievable. So there can be like questions going in Zoom that you're able to listen to while also having your voiceover reading a million miles a minute. And like, it's fascinating that you can comprehend like multiple things going on at once. I'm sure you're doing it right now as I speak. So kudos to you.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You're checking the scores of the basketball game, aren't you?
No, I'm not going to tell the score to you. Anyway, yeah, surprisingly enough, the chat feature was disabled on my side. So I didn't change anything. I have that ability in most Zoom platforms, but I thought there might be a lot of traffic. So I was curious to see if that would happen, but the configuration that it came through on it just showed me who was coming in and out of the meeting. So I didn't get any of the questions fired off to me. So I missed that part of that part of the piece. So I'm glad people are coming off and actually reading their questions. So right on.
I know there was a note by Anya actually in the chat, which is really interesting, our moderator, around dyslexia and that she struggles with dyslexia. And there was a note that she wrote in there that I didn't know that with my dyslexia that I struggle with often. And I'm curious if you could specify what exactly you didn't know. It's super interesting. If she's still here, I know she wasn't.
Yeah, she might have.
That's someone here. That's just maybe, yeah, message. Would you feel like turning on your microphone, Alia? If not, you can add anything on the
That's
chat.
okay.
And
Yeah, I know
if
she's not
that
feeling well.
microphone don't work, no worries. Well,
You save your
still,
voice, we'll connect after.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have to say that Anya has been so active in the chat, some of the questions, summarizing them, organizing them. Some of that has been organized almost alphabetically. She has been doing an amazing job, and I really appreciate her staying this long, this late, feeling not so great. This is amazing. Thank you very much, Anya. We have another question from Kylie. Yeah, I don't know if you would like to step in and bring your question forward. Kylie?
Yes, hello.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. This has been incredible to sit in and listen to. So thank you to all of you. Yeah, I had a question. I was curious because with the accessibility feature that I know we were looking at kind of at the beginning, I was thinking, wouldn't it be, I guess it was like an idea and maybe there would definitely have to be a lot of research to it, but I've never seen a website where before it really enters the website that it would pop up with like a modal that had that exact kind of accessibility screen where you could change between like pause animations or bigger text or change the color contrast. Because I was thinking, for example, if there was a lot of animations on a page, you'd have to see that page before you can even find that feature. So I don't know if anybody's come across that or just your thoughts on that. I just thought it was interesting.
I have never run into that experience, but that's an awesome idea. Thinking strategically, though, you might have a hard time selling that to your your marketing types, right? Like they, you might have to code something in where it detects you're a differently abled user if you've got some kind of software running on your device or that kind of thing to direct you to that less kind of all-on experience potentially.
Yeah, we actually, sorry to interrupt you, Scott, but
Yeah.
At the airline I worked with for a while, it's not there anymore, but you would land on the page and it would actually detect using JavaScript if you were using a screen reader. I don't know how they did it. I don't think it was 100% accurate, but it would detect if you were using a screen reader and would actually prompt you. So if you remember when Scott landed on the page, it was like, oh, there's 47 headings and 100,000 links and yada, yada, yada. Part of that spiel, it would also say, I think it said like, welcome screen reader. We have another experience for you, press, and there's a shortcut to get you to that. It would take you to an accessibility specific booking page so that you could cut all the noise of the typical sort of front page and get to a very streamlined basic version of the page where you could just go and focus on booking your flight. That's not there anymore, but that was kind of a unique experience. And then what we see more often than that is, if you land on a page and you hit tab, it's kind of assumed that you're using a screen reader of some sort, just because typically people aren't tabbing through a site. Screen readers are always tabbing through sites. So that's why you kind of give those shortcuts at first that are like, do you want to skip to the main content? Do you want to skip to the navigation? And then you start to present accessibility options, assuming that somebody tabbing is maybe in need of those.
Yeah, I guess Amazon is the best real world example where they have a click here for a more accessible, friendly experience kind of option. But yeah, there has to be a backdoor way for them to know that you're running some kind of different piece of technology, right? And then you have you don't have to follow that accessible experience, but it is an option that's presented to you. So yeah, I use my Amazon all the way that time because it gets rid of a whole bunch of the clutter that exists on that site and doesn't make my brain hurt so much to have 300 links popping up that I don't need to know all about.
Thank you.
Good question, as they all have been.
Yeah, these are great.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I just to check with you. how do you feel? Are you, do you want to stay a little bit longer, or let's say a couple of questions more? Where are you on energy? This is for Dion and Scott.
I'm good.
I'm
This
good.
is like
Yeah.
Jeopardy.
No, yeah,
Oh,
That's fun.
fantastic.
Let's keep going.
Yeah.
I want to bring one question from the meetup that was submitted, and I found it very interesting. This is from Perry Huang. I don't think he's in the chat, but please let me know if I made a mistake. He says, what are some misconceptions about accessibility?
Oh, that's a good question.
Misconceptions.
Misconceptions. Okay, kind of a blanket statement here, but everyone who has the same disability, so say everyone who is blind or everyone who is hearing impaired, you can create the same experience for all of them. You don't need to individualize it. I guess another misconception would be that we don't need to think about accessibility in our user designs, that people should just be able to use the experiences that we have online. Those would be a couple of good ones for me. I mean, we all know that good accessibility practices are good design practices and therefore make better experiences for all humans. But those would be two that came to mind for me. Dion, did that give you enough time to think on the fly?
I think so.
Okay.
I think one misconception is really around like the ROI of accessibility. So, and then this is a really big challenge for executive buy-in, is they oftentimes, they don't typically say it out loud, but you can kind of read between the lines of like, why would we put so many resources and push back our project time in order to create an experience for less than 1% of our users? And I think that's just a huge misconception, because, if you're designing these experiences, it really is going to help everyone. And especially with like future-proofing your site. So if we think of like the trajectory of voice interfaces and like Alexa and Google Home and all that stuff of navigating stuff with our voice, you can only do that sort of stuff if you have like a nice semantic, like properly coded page, right? So if we're ensuring that things are simple and usable at a very accessible level, that's actually opening up opportunity when we start to push technology and push like I said, voice navigation and things like that. So the ROI is definitely a big misconception, I think.
And that speaks to the whole evangelizing piece too, right? Get into your small groups, find your partners, talk about ROI, right? What's in it? What does it do to improve our brand reputation? How are we going to get a diverse audience buying our products and using our products?
Yeah, well, it's not only that. I have seen some ableism applied. So you say, hey, this is a tool for the inside of the company, and they say, well, we don't hire anybody that needs accessibility. And it's kind of like, but in your post, say that you favor the diversity and you're inclusive, and you cannot bring that cognitive dissonance right in the middle of a conversation when you're trying to get buy-in. But yeah, something inside me just doesn't feel so well.
Lights a fire. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Louis. Yes.
Same here, Luis.
So when we stop recording this conversation, you can hear some words.
Unofficially, of course.
Well, of course. I have Mason here. Thank you for staying so late with us. And yeah, do you want to bring your question? It's a really good one.
Yeah, I would love to. Hi, my name is Mason, and I actually have autism and ADHD, and I'm a up-and-coming UX designer, or a current UX designer. And I was wondering I definitely want to have an accessibility focus and specialty. So when you're crafting the surveys for when you're targeting specifically disabled folks to make your products more accessible, do you have off the top of your head any resources or things that you use to kind of help to create those questions and to make them accessible, and also accommodating to whoever might be taking that survey and the different disabilities.
I know we have a very, very talented researcher on the call, and I don't want to deflect too much here, but
I know she'll come off mute, right, Tiff?
I'm curious, Tiff, if you have any thoughts on that.
Whoa, don't put me on the spot or anything.
I'll take it if you want, Tiff, but
well,
since we're kind of working on this at work anyway.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Mason. And I had the opportunity in this company that I'm working in now at Benevity to actually think about that and work with Scott and work with some of our teammates. And one of the things we started with was, how are we going to ask participants questions that help us identify that they actually have a differing ability? And so Scott and I worked together to actually draft the screener questions that we would ask. And we got feedback from our entire team, some of who are actually here listening. And we did basically a design jam around it and came up with what's the proper wording and what's the proper, do we even ask gender anymore? Let's just ask pronouns. How would you identify that you have differing ability? How does that affect your daily life? What conditions are you affected by? So we actually have crafted some screeners, and then we went and tested those screeners in some case studies as we were selecting our research tool. So User Testing and User Zoom Go did trials with us and allowed us to use those screener questions to see if their panel would have people with differing abilities, and could those people actually participate in the unmoderated usability test. And so we have 10 videos now of people doing that, and we're going to put together a big case study and probably present it to everybody. So we'll have a little bit more information coming up in the next month or so. But great question, and happy to share that screener as well. So we can add that to maybe the resource list that you and Dion will share out, Scott. Maybe we'll just pass that along so that everybody can use those questions and maybe even make them better, and then let us know the changes that they've made as well.
Refine them, because we don't know everything. So thanks for jumping on, Tiff. That's awesome. And Mason, thanks for jumping into the field. You know, it can be difficult to crack in for sure. So thanks for going with your passion. And remember, there's always other humans out here to support you. So just reach out anytime. So
I love it. Thank you so much.
And I guess this is a good time to circle back to Murray. I don't know if you would like to share more more of your questions. I mean,
sure. I'll try to make it a two-parter. So one of the ones I was just wondering was about wants versus needs. So a lot of time when doing user testing, you can hear things, and we're not going to like implement everything people ask for, right? But we want to understand those contexts. We want to understand the challenge that people are running into. But if someone says, I want that blue, we're not going to implement that's blue, kind of necessarily. So I'm just wondering if when you're not, let's say, all familiar with all the different considerations and situations people might run into, it might be harder to differentiate between that want and that need and hearing those things. So I just was wondering if you had any kind of ideas on how for someone not as familiar with things could, I guess, help differentiate between the two. And I'll just ask the other one, which is more related to, we know like WCAG is kind of the standard that we want to try and meet, but in efforts, I was wondering, should that be the focus? And it's like the lowest bar that should be met? Or is a better focus to say, hey, no, it should just work. And as a consequence of that, maybe it does some WCAG, but maybe it doesn't always, and it's better to focus on the overall usability aspect instead. Just some thoughts around those things. So that's what I'll ask today.
We'll take up more offline, Marie, don't worry.
Good questions. I can start first.
Yeah, you go.
I'll give you some time this time.
Okay. Thanks.
So related to the first question, just about how that one single voice can really be amplified, and I mentioned that before, of like just having one voice, one diverse voice can really provide a high impact, and that I do see that happen. Is, you know, one person, one user says something of like, hey, we should do this for accessibility, and it's like, this is the reason why you want to test with multiple visually impaired users, multiple neurodiverse users, just so that you don't kind of get pigeonholed into that exact situation, so that then you can kind of balance things just the same way we don't simply usability test with one user. So that's what I would say for that one. The second question, sorry, what was the second question again? Remind me.
More around is WCAG
Yeah.
versus overall usability.
Right. In my personal opinion, I think WCAG AA standard is your like bare minimum of like, you know what, you can get away with your image alt tags and your correct hierarchy and all that stuff, your tab order, all that stuff. Like I think that's sort of table stakes. What I like is providing a true customized, accessible experience. And that's why we really wanted to show that user way overlay, is because it's giving you a lot more nuance and a lot more options beyond just the standards. And I think what's kind of cool is you can bring your brand and your flavor into a lot of your accessibility practices. So if I share my screen right now quickly, I just want to show you a quick little something here. So in our presentation, like we want to talk the talk here. And so even in our presentation, we have image alt tags associated to all of our images. So if I open up this alt text for myself, somebody who's using a screen reader is going to see this, like it's a photo of Dion Alexander, who's a product designer at Shift. And then I like to add like a little bit of humor and a little bit of personality to it, of like, the photo that you're seeing here is actually an engagement photo, and I crop my wife out and I use it on LinkedIn, and I'm hoping that it's professional enough. And so I think those are the big pieces that are missing from a lot of experiences, is bringing in some sort of personality instead of just saying like, this is an image of Dion, this is an image of Scott. Actually, Scott, what did I write for you? Let me see this. Photo of Scott Herron, who's a program manager of accessibility at Benevity, smiling big for the camera because the Calgary Flames had just beat the Edmonton Oilers. There you go. See?
Okay, so there's a little, hope there's not any Oilers fans that we've offended for life here, but
yeah. And I'm curious, Scott, from your perspective, like how often do you get any sort of flavor, any sort of character, like in your experiences?
Very rarely, right?
Yeah.
Like most of the time you will just get a bare bones description of what's contained with that image, if at all. A lot of times people don't even label those images, right? So that's, you know, I would think that would be more not a nice to have, but kind of a need to have it at this point, right? If we want people to be digital and be able to, you know, embrace all the experiences, I think that's important. So
yeah.
Only a couple quick things to add to Murray and Dion's question. Sometimes I wonder about the, you know, the first part, Murray, whether like a moderated testing environment might be best, so we can drill down to the exact right kind of questions and answers that we might be looking for. Because on moderated, you can only create the questionnaire, right? And then if you're not getting the data that you're looking for, it's really tough to know how valid that is, and maybe that's not what the respondent meant at that time. So, you know, those are concerns that I might have in sort of the unmoderated realm in a lot of cases. So crafting that, you know, questionnaire and user flow, and being as specific as you can, I think totally can make a difference. That's kind of what Tiff and I are testing out with our project. So kind of stay tuned and we'll let you know how it all parses out, but you know, that's important. And then just to tie on to Dion's answer to, you know, the WCAG and everything, yeah, that's kind of the bare bones, right? Because we have a third-party auditor that does our auditing of our products for us. And even though something might pass and say that it's compliant, it doesn't mean that it's going to work, right? Like I still might not be able to get through it, or a keyboard user might not still be able to get through it. And that doesn't create that, you know, man, I like this, I'm going to do this again, I'm going to tell my friends about it, right? So I hate to use it, but it's controversial, but that user delight piece, right, that people are talking about these days. So finding that balance of usability, I think, is super important. And it ties back to, let's survey our users, right? Does this work? Can you use this? Does it make sense? Is it something that you don't have to make 95 clicks to get through something that takes a sighted user 12 clicks, for example, right? Just because it's so cumbersome.
Thank you
Hope
both
that
for your
helps,
answers.
Murray.
No, it does. Thank you both for your answers and taking my questions.
May I pose a question? Because I remember Dion mentioning the event in Calgary UX where Andrew introduced him to accessibility, and that started a journey. So I wanted to ask Scott and Dion, if you had to say something to the people on the call or the people in the recording about how they can start their journey, and hopefully in let's say 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, they become the experts and they are back here presenting to us what they have found, what would you say to them?
Yeah, we'd love that, by the way, if they'd come back and tell us their story, right? You know, how you started, you just went to a talk with these couple of goofy dudes on a Thursday night and took something away from it and ran with it. That would be awesome, right? But I guess my advice would be, don't try and bite off big chunks of this whole accessibility journey, right? Like, find something that you really want to learn about. And then, you know, go through resources, talk to your friends on your network, maybe reach out to somebody who has accessibility experience. You know what, forging those relationships and growing your network is critical when you're trying to learn and then ultimately become, you know, really proficient at a task, and then ultimately, if you want, become you know, a master of that task and put in those hours and feel like you really accomplished something. So that would be my advice. Dion, I'll shoot it over to you though, in case you have other words of wisdom you want to share out.
Yeah, my advice would just be to share your story. It's kind of like what we talked about with testing with one diverse user. Like, we want multiple stories, multiple perspectives, and it's always fascinating to hear everybody's journey into accessibility because they're all completely different. And I would just say share that story, like, regardless of, you know, whether you're doing a presentation where it's been done a million times before, like, it's always going to be unique when you share your own perspective. That's definitely a big one. And then the second piece I would add to it too is really, like, immerse yourself in the experiences. Like, again, there's so many resources where you can read about accessible experiences and learn about best practices, but to actually, like, go and do those those things yourself it's a completely different experience, and I think a really worthwhile one. If you've never used an eye tracker before, or you know, a head pointer for keyboards, like, try them out. And your phones, like, you have so many accessibilities right in your pocket to just try out and see if you can use them, if you can learn them, if they make your life easier. You'll be shocked at how good these experiences are. And I think that really leads to a lot of inspiration and motivation.
So those are really great words, amazing advice. And yeah, I hope that leaves a mark in anybody that is here and anybody that is watching this recording. And yeah, at the same time, from the quick question that you made about how many people are specialized in usability and accessibility in this call. And yeah, none of us could raise our hand. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you need to find a place where to specialize and be different in the job market, guys, just now you know that where is the correlation, you know, like in 70 people in a call, statistically, you couldn't find it. Maybe this is a really good place to go for your next professional move, especially nowadays that I think it's going to be a legal requirement in Canada to have accessibility.
Yeah, at some point, we really didn't get into that tonight, Luis, but at some point our government will catch up to the rest of the world. And yes, this kind of accessibility, usable UX design space will flourish and grow. And you know, many companies like Dion talked about ROI earlier, they haven't been made to see the light of that ROI. People with different abilities want to be involved and be included and thought of, and they have money to spend as well, right? So sadly, they're waiting for the legislation to mandate that for them. But when that happens, this field is really going to explode in our fine country of Canada.
Yeah, absolutely right. And we're maybe going to have more lawyers in the participants next event. Well,
so.
I mean, it's always good to meet a lawyer when you don't need it, right? So I guess it's a good place to be. Well, what can I say? This is an amazing conversation. I mean, I could really feel like it could last forever, but I don't know where you're at on energy, and I don't really feel like I should force you too much with too many questions. Yeah, how do you feel? Do you want to?
I'm good for a bit more. Dion, are you?
Yeah, I've got some more time.
Yeah,
for sure.
I've got some
These
more
are
time.
awesome questions.
Yeah,
so they're energizing.
Very well thought out questions, and clearly you guys are fascinated by the topic. So yeah, happy to stick around for sure.
Awesome. Well, I can see Mason, and I can say that he's been so active and so happy to hear these conversations. That the last question has to go to him. Please, Mason. What's your question?
Thank you. Yeah, I've been loving this so much. Thank you both and everyone that's talked so far for your expertise and questions. I was wondering for y'all, what are maybe like 1 to 3 accessibility features that you just really wish that would be more commonplace, that you would see all over the place, and maybe even like a feature that is maybe right now asking a little too much. That's kind of like that next step, that like innovative of like, man, if this was also like available, this would be so cool or revolutionary.
I can start with that one, and my answer is not the most exciting one. It's exciting to me because that tabbing experience when you first land on a page, to get that sort of hidden accessibility menu just starts the experience off on such a good note. And it's on so few pages and websites, and of the ones that they're on, oftentimes they're broken. Scott, like, we've seen how many that say, skip to content, and it's like, sweet, like you guys are thinking of people outside of your typical user. But then you go to like hit enter on that, and it doesn't skip you anywhere. And it's just like, let's just get these basics down. So that is the feature I want, is like working shortcuts. Working shortcuts that's my ask. I would like that to be common.
That's not too big of an ask.
It's not, right?
No. So since you took that one, I'm going to take one of our terrible ones that we discovered when we were back at our previous gig. And it still is the vein of mine and many other accessibility folk existence, but the whole date picker calendar selector piece is one of the really challenging designs out there that I haven't really seen a good solution for, to be honest with you. There's got to be one, but I just haven't encountered it, and many others that have been on the prowl looking for it haven't really come across it either. So it's a very cumbersome experience to try and choose dates. There's many different ways to build that date picker feature, so it's really a frustrating experience for sure. So those are kind of real world today examples, I think, Mason. In the future, one thing I'd like to see is you should be able to do all this stuff with your voice, and the voice should be able to cognitively read everything to you, not just snippets, right? Like, when you tell Siri something, she goes, oh yeah, here's this great definition of, what a polar ice cap is, right? You get like half a paragraph, and then that's all she tells you, right? So, I mean, that's not fully inclusive. Then the user still has to go to that website and then find, hopefully, that same article if they're lucky, and then read the rest of it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm really hopeful for voice technology. I think we can see it happening. Like even on our TVs, we can now speak to our remote. Like it is happening, which is super cool. In our cars, we can do it. Like this is all happening quite quickly. The quality of it, like Scott says, does need to improve, but like that's happening, and that is a huge one that is going to help everyone.
Yeah, and then being able to have those voice features be able to pick up on anyone's voice too.
Exactly.
So that if you have like a speech impediment or something, or an accent even, just being able to still use it. And I really appreciate just like the authenticity and like just like real answer of like, it would just be nice if they work. Like, can we just make accessibility features work? And I feel like that's so real that even like as UXers, we're still having to battle that like age-old ableism of, well, I can use it, so I can't you, or I don't, why does it need to work, or why do I need to do these things? So I really appreciate all of those answers.
So
and
really
I agree with the voice technology, right? Oh my God, yeah. So
I'm gonna throw one of our streaming providers under the bus and compare the two big giants in the room out there. Amazon is quite good for me to use independently on my own. Netflix, not at all. So I can use Amazon's website. I can go to my TV upstairs, call out what I want to watch on Amazon. It'll load it. Netflix, they don't have any of that, right? So, some consistent user experiences would be great from digital provider to digital provider. So, there's a real world thing that we've all been stuck in our houses for 2 years, right? So,
right. It's so funny that you say that too. It's like you read my mind or like know what I'm doing. And I messaged Tiffany a little bit about this. I'm currently in a UX design program, and I'm building out my capstone. And I'm actually doing my project on bringing an accessibility settings menu to Disney Plus. I specifically really want to work at Disney. Not that you personally can see this, but I have like a fake Disney cast member name tag on and like Disney sweatshirt. I'm like manifesting real hard.
Yeah.
I'm just pretending now that I'm a cast member, it'll happen. But
yeah, exactly.
Trying to bring like an accessibility settings menu to the platform, because it's not there. And although they are accessible, like we can go beyond just like some of the features that are available.
It's accessible, but it's not usable, Mason, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, that's where we all have to like evangelize and fight the good fight, like Dion says, right? Sometimes it's tough. If you're not having a great day, that's when you need your buddies to lean on, right? That's why it's going to take a village. It's sort of one of the big colloquialisms out there of this whole thing.
Yes.
Well, I can see a good question from Perry. Would you like to turn on your microphone and share it? If not, I can read. Okay. What happens when you fail to gather buy-in for integrating accessibility practices on a project? Is there often the possibility of salvaging anything and negotiating with the decision makers, including some key things, even if you won't meet, even if it won't meet your personally bare minimum?
No, can't salvage it.
Yeah.
To be honest, in my experience, if you don't have it from the beginning, it's very unlikely that you will loop around and revisit everything. I don't know if anybody has any other experiences, but like that's the sad reality of it. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations up front right away, get buy-in as quick as you can. Because even if you do get buy-in to like, hey, let's go back and retrofit our site to be accessible, the longer you wait, the more like deviation there is. And it takes so much more work to go back and redo it than to just do it right the first time.
It's so much more human hours, right? Now, the only thing that might change that is if you have a customer escalation with some clout behind them, right? And you have dropped the ball at some level, right? And then there might have to be work done to satisfy that customer or client or whatever terminology you want to put behind them, their concern, right? So you don't lose their business. But that's certainly different than just trying to circle back and get it right for the sake of doing it.
And I think that's where the popularity of these overlays comes in too, right? Of
Yes.
like, oh no, we can't possibly do this. Let's just go apply this Band-Aid and we're good.
Yeah. And you're not, because if
Yeah.
you don't have the nuts and bolts put up in the back end, people are still going to see it for what it is, and it's still going to be broken.
Yes, guys. Sorry to say that accessibility cannot be an Easter egg.
Oh, it cannot.
All right, Tiffany, I can see your virtual hand up.
I wonder if
as well.
she'll come off mute and talk to us.
Of course I will.
Yeah, I know you.
You don't have to ask, Scott.
Yeah, I
I
know.
was just going to add to that I found at Benevity, every company right now is dealing with a lot of turnover, and that sometimes is an opportunity. And so when you get new people who have new ideas, new passions, they might be excited about accessibility. I mean, I don't think the company thought about much of this before Scott came, and they're the kind of company that's going to be very easy to get buy-in, and they're going to want to be passionate about it. Not that it's been easy for you, Scott, but I'm just saying that it's been easier than maybe in other situations. So I think that sometimes change within your organizational structure or with your personnel can actually give opportunity to trying things in a new way. And that's another opportunity for you to maybe stand up and say something, say, we tried this before, maybe with this new group of people, there'll be somebody who is interested.
Yeah, let me just add on to Tiff's comment. We are actually working on a development life cycle document right now that once flushed out and approved by all the stakeholders will bake accessibility in all the way through the end-to-end process. So acceptance criteria, epics, stories, definition of ready, definition of done. There have been many conversations to get to this place, but I feel good about where we're heading, and that I think it's going to happen, and I think it's going to make a difference. So fingers, toes, and eyes crossed, but thanks for sharing that, Tiff. That was awesome.
That's very exciting. I think one of the biggest issues I found is that I don't have a system or a systematic way to put the end-to-end conversation into accessibility that really not only avoids the issue of saying, hey, where does it fit? But also kind of like calms down the people that have normally said, hey, we have tried that before, or, we don't know. It's just, it's much well organized and much more planned from what you have mentioned. So I'm super curious, to be honest. I cannot wait to keep an eye on where it goes.
I think that empathy building piece that I talked about before, Luis, is a great step, right? Like get some people into a room in a small group, have a couple willing victims / guinea pigs, turn on voiceover or JAWS and try and do something without being able to see it. Then you're going to get that sort of groundswell of, oh, this is bad, we need to fix this, right? And that might partially be the impetus to start to change that thought process.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Wow, we have, well, it's almost closing 9 p.m. Wow, you have been absolutely amazing, and thank you for holding the space for that long. Once again, I'm going to check with you guys. Where are you on the conversation? Do you feel to stay, or is this good to kind of like wrap up the night? We can always have more events if you would like to join us again. Scott, Dion, you're the masters of this conversation. Please, where do you feel?
I've got 2 little ones that are going to be up pretty
All
soon,
right.
most likely. So I'm starting to hit my wall here. It's my bedtime, but I would love to come back and chat more.
Yeah, I think a chapter 2 is great. Could we throw in like maybe 2 more questions and then we'll let everybody go? Because I know it's not 9 o'clock for everybody. It might be 10, 11, midnight, that kind of thing, because we got all different time zones we're working with.
Yeah, sounds good.
Absolutely. Well, that's amazing, and yeah, and thank you for all the people that are staying online too. It's really fantastic. And yeah, before please, could you just raise your hand if you have any questions? Otherwise, I can pick it from the meetup pool that we gathered before. All right, I can see Rebecca. Rebecca, please join us.
Hi, I'm on audio. So I signed up for Be My Eyes, the app, and I've only been called a few times because there's so many volunteers. So I would love to do some volunteering kind of like that. Do you guys have any suggestions for me?
Are you in Canada, Rebecca, or are you in the States?
California, Northern California, San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay, because there must be some local, like in Canada, we have an organization called the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, who is always looking for volunteers for this kind of stuff.
Okay.
Maybe are you like near San Jose, San Francisco area kind of area?
Yeah.
They must have like an affiliate of, like, geez, I'm trying to think of like the right title, but like National Federation for the Blind, or California, some kind of blind association, that kind of thing. Maybe pitch it into the Google machine, and you know what, they always need volunteers. People need help to go shopping, or all kinds of stuff, right? So yeah, the app is so widespread with, you're right, like so many volunteers. People have so much time on their hands, so it's hard to kind of get that cool experience, although it's awesome of you to step up and do that. Yeah, it's hard to kind of get involved, and especially where you are, where there are so many people, right? If there weren't millions of people around you, you might get more experiences, to be honest, too.
Yeah.
So that would be my kind of call out, is maybe reach out to some of the local agencies and see if they need any kind of support. You might find there's all kinds of things other than shopping that people probably will need help with. Okay, thanks.
That's really interesting too. I had never heard of Be My Eyes, and I just Googled it, and the description, for those that don't know, is it says Be My Eyes is a free app that connects blind and low vision people with sighted volunteers and company representatives for visual assistance through a live video call. That's super cool. Good for you, Rebecca.
Oh, I wish. I mean, thanks. What happens is someone call, like like my iPad's open, I see someone has a call, and then it says, do you want to answer the call? Yes. And so then someone might be like, okay, does my jewelry go with my shirt and my pants, or something like that?
Yeah, it's like,
or show me some.
Pandemic though, it was different, right? Like people used to go out and like volunteer to take people places and all that kind of stuff, right? So they've kind of evolved this app into this sort of virtual thing now. So yeah, let's hope they get back to the other side of it too, because interaction with humans is important for everybody.
I hear that. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Rebecca. Way to give back.
Yes. It makes me feel happy that there are so many volunteers. It's like, hey, that's a good problem to have. But yeah, if I get to do some research, Rebecca, I will send you some information. Sam, can see your hand up, please.
Hi there. Thanks so much, guys, for this presentation. It's been awesome. I'm in healthcare and I'm transitioning to UX, and just wondering if you know of any certifications on learning about more accessibility, or is it more just kind of real life learning in that sense?
Ooh, accessibility certifications. I know LinkedIn offers some like courses there. I don't know if they're like full on certifications. That's a good question. Scott, have you heard of any?
Yeah, I'm just typing something into Google here because I want to make sure I get it right for Sam. It's IAAP certification, but I want to look up what the acronym means because I forget. My late Thursday night brain is not functioning as well as it should.
Or would the conferences be more of the better way to go, or just, I mean?
Well, the conferences are always good, Sam, because you can go and pick and choose your events, or often they're free nowadays, right? So like getting, access to that information is always great. Yeah, so I think that's always a great thing, is to, absorb whatever you can from any resource you can get access to. So
I can look that if I can look that up later, the IAAP, that's great. Great start. I just, yeah, thank you very much for everything. It's been really great. I work with disabled kids, and this is awesome knowledge to share. Yeah, so I really appreciate it.
it'll be about the third or fourth one on your Google search. They got like a whole IAAPHQ.org website, and they got phone numbers and everything on here. So
Perfect. Thank you.
And Sarah, I'll add to that too, of just an area to look that is making huge accessibility gains, especially for kids, is gaming. Video games are coming a long way, and they're putting a ton of work in that area. So not necessarily certification specific, but learning more about that topic is gaming is a really good area to look into.
Okay, thank you.
And they're really trying to be inclusive now, right? Because they know it's a market they haven't really tapped yet. So that's really spurring them on to really get as many diverse thoughts inside their design patterns and everything. So
Thanks again for everything. This has been awesome.
Some answers also in the chat. I will put them all in the resource pools that we're gathering. And yeah, hopefully I should keep a live document where we can keep on adding more of this information. That will be something I will put on my to-do list. And the next part will be more about where to put it, because that's something that needs to be not only for the Calgary UX members, it has to be open for everybody. All right, well, talking about open for everybody, I guess, if we have maybe one last question. If not, I guess it will be a really good time for Dion's kids to hear a lullaby before going to bed, or a story.
Oh, they're in bed already. They're just probably going to wake up soon. They don't like to
wow.
let me sleep.
Okay, well, yeah, I understand that feeling. Oh, wow. Okay. No, if not, well, the only thing that we can say is thank you so much. It's been not only a very informative and educative experience. I think quite a lot of us approach this topic in a different way that sometimes is not conducive to really great conversations. So I was so excited to see Scott and Dion and how they talk to each other, and how they reference not only the material that they have in their knowledge, but also in their life,